Hey guys, how are you?
How are you?
Good.
Good.
To start, I came from a wrestling family. My family was obsessed with wrestling my entire life. So going into the Iron Claw, I was like, I'm aware of what's about to happen, but I have loved kind of watching everyone come to the realization of the Von Erich story and just seeing this family. But part of that is making them look like the Von Erichs because they do have that distinct look that I think everyone kind of relates to. And so for you guys, and we can start with Jen and then go in the circle, what was the challenge of like bringing that vibe to screen without making it feel so entirely 80s in like the wrong way?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is the challenge all the time. You don't want a period piece to look hokey because reflecting back on it, there's things that in pulp culture really did happen, but on screen when you're doing a drama, look, they won't translate the right way and would be way too distracting. So I think it was fairly easy to represent the Von Erichs because they had so much personality and so much they're such distinct characters amongst themselves. Like, Zach, Kevin looks one way, David has a look, Carrie has a look. So that was really easy just to kind of draw upon. And there's so much research online just to hit off the bat to recreate. So we did work closely with Sean and made sure that we hit the beats, made sure we weren't distracting, and took some chances as well, which I think is important. I think actually the biggest challenge of our project was that it was for costumes, it was a 6.5 week prep and a 6 to 7 week shoot. So you have to put basically six family members entire lives into 2 hours of content. And how does Sean make sure he tells the story in that way? And these are heroes to him. And so, for us, it was just the challenge was making sure that every single day we got our job done and we executed and we elevated the script and we served the story as well as we could. Because I've said this example before, like the day we shot the wedding, we started that day with a funeral. We went someplace else in the middle of the day. I can't remember because it's so crazy. And at 4 o'clock, we had a call for background for wedding. I mean, it was just every single day was an experience to get the job done. He didn't have a big timeline to shoot his movie.
Yeah. And out Natalie, what do you had the challenge of making that hair on Zac Efron look good. And it still was like, it's my phone background right now. Like I have him holding the flower.
Oh, nice.
Eric,
Oh,
like,
that's awesome.
so,
That's amazing.
but like, look, like I'm a,
Oh my God, that's awesome.
but you had a challenge of making this hair look both realistic and good because the Von Erichs were not known for having great hair. But
No, thank you.
for
I felt
you,
bad saying that over
Thank you.
interviews. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want to say that it's bad hair, but it was bad hair.
I mean, Jeremy Allen White said it
That's
on
what the 80s
Myers.
was bad hair. Like we've gotten better about like the recreation of the 80s, but like back in the 80s, it was like you went and picked your haircut out of like a magazine.
Yeah, and it's so for you, what was it like when you were looking at these almost mullet hairdos at the start of this project? What was it like to kind of, navigate working that into like what would look good on Zac Efron and Jeremy Allen White and Harris Dickinson, making sure that those iconic looks didn't detract from what the story was telling?
No, absolutely. I mean, every time, like we had two custom wigs for Zach. So, and we had a custom wig for Harris. So we had wig fittings. So our camera test was like actually our first wig fitting for them. And whenever, like, since they were custom made, I always have them made like, so they were like actually about down to here when they came in. And then I slowly eased up the cut because like because they had a lot of different hairstyles that they went through. So it was kind of working together with Zach and Sean and all the research photos that we'd all pulled and like just kind of coming together and like, okay, let's take it up a little bit because I was like, we have one shot on this. Like those wigs are like 10,000, they start at like $10,000 usually. So they get pretty expensive. so
I do
if
want to
you cut
add
it too
that.
short, there's no going back.
But
Oh
also,
yeah.
how rare is it to have your first wig fitting at a camera test?
Oh yeah. Usually you have like
Oh,
five
you're
or
just
six
okay.
before.
Yes, a week out from filming. So yeah,
Right.
My
Yeah,
goodness.
with everybody's schedules and our tight schedule, like we had to like just slam everything into like, I mean, like Jim was saying, everything was just like, okay, it's like a marathon getting through every day.
Oh my God.
But it
And
was fun. Like I said, we slowly stepped everything up with the haircut, slowly but surely. And then like we photographed it for the camera test. And like that is one thing. You'll see like there weren't highlights in it for the camera test. But so and then we decided to highlight it, but we were like, okay, this is for flashback photos, so it makes sense. And maybe that was like a summer. And his hair, like Kevin's hair is blonde in some photo, almost blonde on top in some photos. And then others it's like a level 6 or like kind of more brownish. So, but they grew up in the country and I grew up in the Texas in the country too. So I was like, I know like people out in the country don't do their hair up like most 80s people. It is more of a relaxed look because of this how everybody's raised around there. Like that's a little too flashy that's like big city living, you know?
I love it. And I mean, to be quite honest, part of this movie, they're like, I want to get back to the costumes in a minute, but I do like that a lot of this movie is, shirtless Zac Efron. So it's hair and makeup. Like without those two elements, you're just looking at a shirtless dude. And so for you, you do such a good job of like making those bruises and those cuts and everything come to life in a way that you're like, yeah, that guy got punched in the face. And so for a movie like this, that's like all of those little cuts have to, not only continue in scenes that are like right after or be like such a specific look as we've just watched them happen. What was the challenge of like, bringing that to life? Because it's not easy in a wrestling movie, especially.
No, I mean, I think the biggest coordination for stuff like that is with stunts, is having the conversations, because let's say we shoot something prior to the wrestling match actually being filmed. I need to know that they've laid out the groundwork for the choreography of like, okay, this is when this is going to happen. So it's it's going to be a right hook or an uppercut, which would land the bruise in this specific spot. And then what's the time frame from that match to when we see the bruise next or the injuries next. Like, Jeremy had that horrific road rash all over his back, and we really had to nail down the timeline because that reveal of his foot was so massive that it couldn't look like he just had it happen, but we didn't want there to be no evidence of an accident. We wanted like a little bit of like what happened, and then slowly the reveal gets worse and worse. And so it's really between choreography with stunts, and then also with our script supervisor and Sean figuring out that timeline with the director, really nailing down that time frame, because I am such a big fan of not cheating the timeline. If a bruise is supposed to look 6 hours old, I want it to look 6 hours old. If a bruise is, 2 months old, I want it to be yellow and green. Like I want to get those colors right. So I think that is so crucial, is like doing the research on the actual timeline, but then also having the proper, color and tone for things like that, because that really helps to sell. When you see yellow or green in a bruise, that that's an identifier that it's old. And the same thing with like Jeremy's back, that the colors that we chose for that and the dryness of the texture was more of like a scab material than like a wet, fresh, bloody, injury. So you really kind of have to pay attention to a lot of different elements, and it's really all about collaboration in those moments.
Yeah, and I do want to ask, because my friend and I, this became a conversation after the movie, because I noticed that Jeremy Allen White had a scar on his back when he was throwing the discus in like the beginning of the movie. And then when she was like, no, I think that was from the crash. I'm like, no, it was from the beginning of the movie. I think he just has a scar. Did you guys like, does he actually have a scar? And did you guys ever try and like have a conversation?
That's Jeremy.
Okay.
No, it was never the cool thing about Sean as a director to like collaborate with is he was never like, let's hide who Jeremy is necessarily. Like if he's got a scar, it's like that's a real thing that happened. It's like, no, it might not have been true to form to Kerry Von Erich, but also those boys were getting thrown around those rings on a daily basis, and what they put their bodies through, like they are probably like little cuts and injuries that I missed along the way that we could have used as real reference to tie them with the real characters, but we just let that little bit of Jeremy show through.
I can't wait to tell my friend I was right. I'm so, because I was like, no, he has, that was there.
Yeah.
But then Jen, you had the the task, because it is a task, of bringing Ric Flair to screen, which that is not an easy man to kind of emulate costume wise, because that is kind of what people know with Ric Flair. They are instantly like, this man's robes are iconic, his outfits are iconic. When you're doing this era of Ric Flair, especially where he is like prime in his Nature Boy arc, what did you kind of look for to like make sure that that flairness came out in the costumes? Because it does. Like I instantly was like, yes, I know that this is Ric Flair just by looking at him.
That is good. First of all, it was an honor to recreate Ric Flair because Ric Flair is like so over the top that is so cool. And to be someone, we all came into wrestling in a different way. I came into this story not knowing anything about wrestling, so obviously didn't know anything about the Von Erichs, wouldn't know anything about Ric Flair then. So by the time I got to Ric Flair, I was like, oh my God, this is gold. Like he's so freaking cool. Basically also it was kind of carte blanche to pick which robe to do because that match was not something we were recreating verbatim. So, and Sean Durkin was like, yeah, you can pick any robe. It's Ric Flair. They're all iconic, just like you said. So as I was doing my deep dive, we were like, oh my God, it's like Zaza Gabor, Liberace, like, it's like always like Boa. So I was like, it was at that time when I was doing it, we were so entrenched in getting all of the other matches. By the time we got to Ric Flair, which was later on in our match shooting, I was like, okay, we've got all these primary colors. So obviously if I'm going to do Ric Flair, I got to pick another color that's not primary. And he had turquoise, he had all sorts of great colors, but the pink stands out. It's peacocky. He's flamingo pink with like this Pepto-Bismol pink and a boa in sequence. And I kind of narrowed it down to 2 robes. And by the time we got into the process of, working with Erin and making their stuff, it was sort of like, what can we execute on like time and money as it does. And there's reality to the aspect. So, and working in Baton Rouge, I went and utilized all of those fabulous Mardi Gras shops in Louisiana and came back with like just overdid it with sequins and all these other, anything shiny in sequins. And so I brought it to my cutter fitter and we're talking about it. It was so much sequins to actually applique, and we're coming up with a pattern in rows to make sure it looked like that picture. And he couldn't hand sew it. It would have taken too long. He couldn't machine sew it because it would have broken his needles. So he ended up gluing the whole thing down. I mean, it's like a work of art that he made it in time and made it for camera. And you could just bring the hanger out and could have done like the hanger with the robe and had the whole match because everybody loves that vibe of Ric Flair. And like, it just is like the nuance of wrestling. His nickname's Nature Boy. It doesn't even make sense. It's so amazing. And he's got these over the top monograms and, he's just so much flair. He is Ric Flair. I mean, he's just, and when I started to learn that they did those promo beats and Sean would share those with us, and like, Ric Flair, those are Ric Flair. He's like, I have, a mile long limo with 25 women in it. I mean, it's hilarious. He's hilarious. It's amazing. And he was talented and it's like so cool. So I'm glad that it was a showstopper.
Yeah, well, and it's very funny because like I said, I come from a family where everyone loved wrestling. Like my brothers used to recreate the robes. Like they would have my sister-in-law like stitch feathers. Like it's like unlocks a part of my childhood to like remember the Ric Flair robes that used to exist in my home. But Natalie, you also had like, you're talking about how expensive these wigs are. And then it instantly made me think of like where it's the iconic, because his hair is so white, blonde, pooling of blood in Ric Flair's hair during like these matches. And I was just like, you just said that these were expensive. And then
okay, that was another one. We had blood wigs because that platinum blonde will stain, the blood will stain them. So I was like, and the one we had for Ric Flair, like for his promo and for the beginning of his match before he gets bloody, we had a custom wig that I'd rented. So it was still expensive, but not quite as expensive as like a full custom made one that we purchased for the show. I rented it from another hair department head that I've worked with before. And so I was like, we cannot get any blood on this because the blood will stain the lace, and that lace is like tissue paper. It's like Kleenex. It's so fragile and delicate. I mean, they were like my little babies. I was like, don't touch it too hard. Don't even look at it wrong.
And also the pink of the fabric dyed into the wig as well.
It did, yeah, because he got sweaty like, and it like.
You had to worry about the blood and the paint dye. It was very stressful within the constraints.
Oh my!
Yeah, because at one point I was like, I don't remember. I've used this blood before, and I don't remember it being so pink. And then we were like, wait a minute, I think it's the feathers.
I love that Ric Flair's feathers are just dyeing hair left, right, and center. It makes me
I mean,
so
he's every
One
bit
of
of him is
those
a little bit
texts you
out of
don't see
control.
coming. It's like the end of the night and you're like, oh God, now what? You know, you're like, what just happened? Yeah. So
I was like, do you have color remover for dye?
yes.
Because it's in the wig.
and then to go off of that, like when you are doing the makeup for these wrestlers that like have these iconic moments, like the blood in Ric Flair's blonde hair. Like I remember seeing pictures of that from when I was younger, or like the picture I showed you with that's my phone background that is a picture of Kevin Von Erich. What did you kind of look at to make sure that like when you were approaching it from a makeup standpoint that you brought those little nuances to life within these famous wrestlers that we're seeing throughout the movie?
Yeah, I think, I mean, to be honest, for the anything blood related, it really was like almost matching it exact. Um, so it was kind of nice to almost have like a pattern to follow, which was really great. But when we did the camera test, the hair and makeup test, uh, I worked with our DP who we literally swatched every single blood that I had. And we were like, okay, what world do we want to live in on camera? What is going to sell? And so it's like, okay, well, these are the color ranges I need them to be. If it's fresh blood, they need to be a little pinker, a little bit lighter, not so deep brown, maybe a tiny bit of orange in there. And then the darker bloods need to have like that depth of color. And we don't want them to, lie flat on the screen. So one of my favorite things that we did was it didn't get a ton of coverage in the actual show, but I know a lot of people have been posting like behind the scenes now, so you're seeing it. But Jeremy was covered for that leather strap match that they shot.
Looks so good.
Yeah, and it was really fun because Jeremy only had extensions in, so we had a little bit more freedom. And I think that's one of the reasons why we chose him, because Sean was like, I want this to be bloody. And I'm like, Jeremy's your best bet. So it's really cool because it's like a fun, like layering process. I'm like packing the blood into his hairline and down his face, and the color that I used, like, didn't move. Then I pack another one on to give it a little bit more depth. And now those two are like the basis. And then there's another like liquid blood that goes on top of it that can move around while he's shooting, can get on his clothes. Jen made sure that he had doubles of his t-shirt. And then it was easy to reset because the other two colors underneath were like what you'd call like a drying blood that they didn't move. And so that's kind of how we had to approach all of the makeup looks. Like Ric Flair, we did something similar because I was already kind of in that bloody Jeremy.
I mean, this looks so
That's amazing.
I love this should be a poster.
Yeah.
It's like the airbrush.
Yeah.
Do that on the letterbox posters, just where you can pick whatever.
Yeah.
Let's do that picture of Jeremy Allen White.
Yeah. So it was like we were already handling and dealing with all the blood. So I was like, Nat, if you trust me, like I got this. So with Ric Flair, we kind of did a few different approaches to it before we actually applied the blood, because with his blood wig, once it was bloody, that was all we had. So yeah, we could keep adding blood, but we didn't want to make it look like he had, because I've worked on a wrestling show before, and I don't want to like spoil it for wrestling fans, but a lot of the guys, they used to hide razor blades in their tape, and they would cut themselves because it's just a surface cut. And because it's like something like your forehead, which is super tight, it bleeds like immensely. And so regardless if in the real fight he actually bled like that because Kevin hit him too much, or if it was something where it was more a theatrical thing where he did it himself, we wanted to kind of hit that note of like on the forehead where it just bleeds like crazy, and it kind of comes down. And because Rick's hair is crazy and longer and sweating, like then it just starts to kind of to the rest of his hair. So we got to have a little bit of fun with like all of the different like blood elements. And with Zach, it's funny because that photo, that's your background. I remember we had like just finished shooting a match, and Zach was about to head out to go change, and they were like, wait, let's snap this photo real quick. And we were just like, okay. And they were like, get blood. And so we just like threw it on him real quick, and they showed me the reference photo. I was like, okay, like didn't even have time to like color match it. That just like, because like Jen said, this schedule was so tight to get everything done that they were pulling to take photos whenever they could. And it was like, we would just do whatever we could. So we always had everything on standby just in case. And so that photo was like insane because he was literally exiting the sportatorium to go change to get into his next look. And they were like, wait, throw blood on his hand and his face and let's do this. So it's always fun when moments like that come out, like that photo. And our photographer was amazing.
Yeah, it's I love it. But Jen, when you are looking at these brothers who all have, like you said earlier, they have such a distinct style between the three of them. And then also, you know, Michael and Mike, and then even Chris had his own, which I know Chris isn't in the movie, but like his style is very different from his brothers too. What for you do you look at reference photos to like bring certain outfits to life, or do you just understand the vibe of like each of these brothers and kind of gear your costuming in scenes that aren't, you know, the wrestling matches or interviews or whatever, to like make sure that they still fit in that style that they've worn in other things?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like because it's a biopic and it's based on real people, so you're going to start obviously with that baseline of research that's like reality, and then at some point it kind of blurs and they become characters as well. But as soon as you start calling all that research, like it's very clear, just like we all do. We all have a sense of our own style, whether it's no style or style, it doesn't matter. Everybody dresses a certain way, right? So Kevin, really, when you start to look at it, he is like the all-American jock. And that really was his best trait, his best talent was he was such an amazing athlete. But remember, he's like not good on the stick. And, you know, all the things that you need the whole persona to be the best wrestler, that maybe not what he did. But so he became like the jock style, and he was just kind of in knits and in neutral colors, but I made sure I tried to use like meshes and, you know, just something different and add some texture and some depth in there. And as he progresses, because he has about 60 changes since he tells the story from 77 till, you know, 78, 9 till 90, 90, 91. You know, he's going to grow and grow out of it, and he takes over and he gets out of wrestling. So he starts like what was t-shirts becomes polos, becomes button front shirts, you know, becomes basically, he becomes more of a Zen-like person in the end. So you have a nice arc there. And then David's like, you know, the Western flair, like a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll. His shirt style is, his ring robe style is even a Western shirt inspired. And Kevin's was a hoodie inspired, you know, kind of like the Breakfast Club. And anything Western related. And like we tried to do little pops of things. We had like Western collar tips and leather vests. He wears a leather blazer to church. It's things we might not see in our final, you know, movie, but there's definitely a lot of, you know, that David had a lot. I mean, he wore a football jersey with a suede jacket with a snakeskin hat band and snakeskin boots. I mean, these guys dressed so fun to recreate their looks and their vibes. And Carrie's the rock star, and Jeremy is a rock star. He's got that haircut. He's got that sexy charisma, you know. So, and he's got the poppy 80s look, I would say. And Mike, it was always like the perfect example is that picture of the three brothers shirtless and like jeans, and like Fritz is like shirt open and like, you know, his legs wide open, you know. And like there was always a picture of Mike, like they would all be dressed and he'd be like in a polo and corduroys, like in wallabies, you know. And like even Sean tried to do a few vignettes where like they were all pumping weights and Mike was in the corner reading. I mean, he was just trying to make sure like he knew he didn't fit into this group and was drawn into it and probably didn't want to get into wrestling per se. And, you know, he had to combine the two brothers into it, but I never really researched Chris as much because he wasn't in our script. And everybody has their own vibe, and Lily being the feminine, but she's sassy, and she's such a cool woman to begin with. So just making sure we hit that sassiness, and then we get into like the nurturing aspect and more like cocoon sweaters and stuff like that. And Fritz is just stuck in time doing his own thing, like wearing those shirts, wanting to get the belt. So that was his whole look.
Yeah, and I think for a last question, and I want to ask all of you about this process, because obviously the last scene is the scene that everyone has been talking about, and for good reason. Like seeing Zac Efron sit there just sobbing. Like I bonded with this like random lady I didn't know sitting next to me at the press screening, because we both were just like sobbing. And then my brother was like, before we went and saw it together, was like, oh, let's watch all the Dark Side of the Ring videos. And so then to see, you know, Kevin Von Erich actually say like, I'm not a brother anymore, hurts so much more when you watch this movie and you're like, the man actually thinks that. Like, this is so sad. But all of those elements only work when you're looking at Zac Efron and you don't see Zac Efron, which that's part of his acting ability, but it's also like looking at this man and seeing Kevin Von Erich. What, especially with that scene, like the moment that is like everyone seeing the emotional toll everything is taken on Kevin, what was the importance for all of you and all of the departments working together to make sure like that specific moment was as perfect as it could be?
I think for me, it was the most simple, like, there could have been much more that went into it, but for me, it was like, I'm going to let him do his thing. I made sure he felt good, and you just kind of walk away because, like you said, that was, at least from a makeup perspective, that was all Zac. And so there comes a point where you like, almost like letting the bird out of the nest. It's like, okay, this is all you now. Like, I've done everything I can do. I'm gonna just let you shine in this moment, because that is still, to this day, I've seen the movie 3 times. Every time it gets me. Every time. I could be like, I know it's coming. I know it's coming. Like, don't, and it gets me every single time. So I will take zero credit whatsoever for that specific moment, and just give Zac all of the praise in the world for that.
Yeah, for me, it was, I mean, similar. The only thing that mattered to me was making sure that you never saw the wig, so it wasn't distracting from his performance. There was no looking and, oh, let me make this look more like Kevin. It was all about making sure that nobody, it's not like, oh, there's a big old hunk of lace here in this amazing scene. Just making sure it didn't look like a wig. That's all. That was all Zac, 100%. Like, I remember I was like tearing up and crying behind, like watching the monitor. I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, well, you know, when when a cast member is going to get into that headspace, you give them a lot of room because it's very emotional. You don't know, you know what they're doing to get into that headspace. So definitely, you do last looks, and then you just, everybody's in the back very quiet. I also didn't know he was going to be crying like that in the scene. Of course, as a costume designer, I don't need to know that, but you know, maybe Elle or was aware of it because of tears or something. But I mean, I think that performance is so beautiful, and with his two sons, oh my God, they're so cute. Those sons that play his sons, and for me, it was there was actually one other scene afterwards that didn't make it into the final cut, where he visits Fritz. So there's 2 scenes at the end where we really are going to showcase Kevin as Kevin that we think of now. I mean, he's the brother that survives, and when you also watch Dark Side of the Ring, you can see he's moved to Kauai. He's very Zen-like to me. I find it not a coincidence that he just so happened to not have wrestled, and he wrestled barefoot, you know, like he's connected to he's, you know, there's something, you know, based in his grounding. And so we wanted to make sure he was barefoot. When you watch that Dark Side of the Ring, he's in like khakis walking around his backyard in Kauai, and he's kind of got like this Zen-like vibe, Bali-esque printed shirt. So definitely our last 2 changes with Zac. We wanted to make sure we know that he's at peace. He's become a different person. He's gone through his process so much, obviously, and he thought he was cursed and this and that, and he's really come out the other side. You know, hopefully what we think is a whole person. So, you know, amazing. I mean, the real Kevin's amazing. So when you watch that, you're like, damn, like it's so good. And I'm so pleased. It makes me so happy that people are sobbing in the audience, which I know is so perverse to say, but I'm like, oh my God, thank God the movie's touching. You know, like it's a profound movie. It's just not about just wrestling. There's so much into the story of these people's lives. So
Yeah, I think my favorite thing before, just in case, Jen, if you really want to see the emotional impact, because I'm sure, you know, Rachel, you've seen it. People are sending me pre and post Iron Claw reaction videos from TikTok. I lose it, because you see, there was this one particular one where it was like a group of men like, yeah, we're going to see Iron Claw, and they come out and none of the boys are standing next to each other. They're all on separate benches, and they're all just like, and you're just like, holy shit, that, like, look at what this did. And so I think it's so beautiful to have been a part of something that is allowing across all generations to see men be emotional is just like the most amazing thing. And I think in all of the interviews we've done, I don't think like, now that it's released, the reaction that it's getting is being talked about enough. I think that seeing people unlock an emotion, whether it's like, I want to call my brother, or oh, wow, this hit me because of something else, I think it's so beautiful how it really has opened things up in that way.
Yeah, I truly like it was very it's not funny, but my one friend saw it and she was so upset and she was like, I can't believe he lost 3 of his brothers. And then me and my friend went 4 and she went,
Yeah.
"What?" And like was like, there's another one. And we're like, yeah, that's why he's not included. They were like, this is too much. But like love this movie so, so much. So thank you guys for talking with me today. I really appreciate it. And
Of course.
I can't
Thank you.
good things about Iron Claw.
Thank you so much, Rachel. We appreciate it so much. It means a lot to us.
Have a great one, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
You too. Bye.